While the games might not count just yet, we had Orioles baseball on our televisions for some people over the weekend, kicking off the spring training schedule of games for the Orioles in Florida. And I'll break it all down, plus some Orioles news and notes coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, February 26th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look back at the first two spring training games of the season. Yes, it's nice that the Orioles won both of those games against the Red Sox and the Pirates, but the results are not really what you're looking at in spring training. It's more of the process, it's more of the underlying data, and it's a little bit of how the young guys perform when they get their chances. So I'll give you my takeaways, the things you need to know from Saturday and Sunday spring training games, and then we've got some injury updates from around Orioles camp at the end of the pod as well. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So we'll begin this one with Saturday's spring training opener. Ed Smith Stadium looked like it was a sellout down there in Sarasota, with the Orioles beating the Red Sox 4-3 to kick off the spring training season. And hey, let's treat it like it's season mode. Jump back in. The 5 things you need to know from the Orioles spring training opener on Saturday. And the first thing you need to know is, unfortunately, this is nothing on the field. But the first thing you need to know is Masson is still Masson. I mean, before you could look at Corbin Burnes in an Oriole uniform, before you could look at Adley Rutschman homering in his first spring training at bat, before you could see any of that, you noticed that Masson is Masson. Now, it was, I don't even want to say nice, maybe a little better, that the Orioles announced that they would show 7 spring training games on Masson. It was 4 last year and 3 the couple of years before. 7 was more in line with what they would do pre-pandemic, although they showed more games than that back then. But it's still not nearly what most teams in baseball will show. And then they also announced, hey, we're going to do 7, but we're not sending our announcers on site. We're going to produce it mostly remotely. And if you're wondering, you're not in the broadcast business, you just don't understand, hey, what's the difference? What could possibly matter? We have so much technology these days. Why would it matter if you produce and announce the game from in Baltimore, even though it's in Sarasota, versus being there in Florida? If you watch Saturday's game on Masson, you know what the difference is. A center field camera that apparently was on a crane, couldn't get a camera person out there, and was just swaying back and forth like an earthquake, bringing on vertigo for many people out there. It's like the Mr. Krabs meme, but trying to watch an Orioles game. Had to turn off the Masson broadcast after an inning and a half because of that nonsense. An orange hue on one of the other cameras. The score bug was going in and out, although that's kind of regular for Masson. This is what happens when you cut the costs of your RSN. And the hope is that when David Rubenstein takes over, he'll make some Masson decision that makes the product better. And the announcing team is still great. We didn't have Kevin Brown on Saturday, but we know how good he is and how good the Orioles have analyst-wise as well. And they've even added Ben Wagner to the team, the former announcer for the Blue Jays on radio and on TV. He'll do a little bit of both for the Orioles this year as well. A nice addition right there. But I mean, it's still John Angelos in charge. It's still Angelos' Masson. And you just got to clean it up. I mean, the quality of things across the board, I mean, in the U.S., honestly, is just corporations cutting costs, and just forcing you to basically accept a worse product. And it happens at Masson too. But on the flip side, there was good stuff that went on the field. And the second thing you need to know from Saturday's spring training opener is that Corbin Burnes really is an Oriole. Yes, the trade was made a month ago, but we finally got to see him pitch in a game setting in an Orioles uniform. He got the start for the spring training opener, only threw 1 inning. That was really only the plan. Scoreless inning, a hit, couple of strikeouts, 22 pitches. We saw kind of the full pitch mix from Burnes in that one. Not many huge takeaways, not even many from Burnes himself when he talked to the media after the 1 inning. What that's about is showing he's healthy, he's here, he's really good, and Corbin Burnes is an Oriole. And that might be the biggest takeaway from this entire game, is that trade actually, it was real. Like, it wasn't some sleight of hand. He is on the Orioles. Corbin Burnes in that fluorescent orange is certainly fun to watch. Third thing you need to know from Saturday's opener is that Jackson Holliday started the game at second base. And this isn't too much of a surprise. We've been hearing from the Orioles they're going to give Holliday a lot of looks at second this spring. And to be honest with you, if Jackson Holliday is going to make the team out of spring training, it's going to be as a second baseman. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to play innings at shortstop this year, because he absolutely will play some short for the Orioles this season. But with Gunnar Henderson looking like one of the best shortstops in baseball, and I think Jorge Mateo is still going to make this roster, the opening is at second base for a left-handed hitter at second base. And the one knock on Jackson Holliday's game, there was a good article in Baseball America last week about this. The one knock on his game is the arm strength. And you take away that knock a little bit when you play him at second instead of short, because the throw is just shorter and easier to make. If you can still make the plays at second, but make the throw a little easier on him, I think he'll fill in at second well. He did a really nice job. It was an Adley to Jackson caught stealing, where he picked the ball out of the dirt and slapped the tag on in that game. Looked really nice at second. Of course, something he's done at shortstop plenty of times as well. But I think the second base thing is going to work out for Jackson Holliday, and that is going to be hopefully his entrance onto the opening day roster. Now, he did go 0 for 2 at the plate in this game, but again, it's not about the results. It's about the little things that you can pick out of the game. Fourth thing you need to know from Saturday's game, and we knew this was going to happen, the bullpen competition for the Orioles, especially with there being arguably 4 open spots right now. We thought there were 2. Then you had the Bradish and Means injuries. Realistically, Wells and Irvin going to the rotation means there's 4 spots up for grabs, I would think, in the Orioles bullpen. And that competition, because there's a lot of guys vying for those spots, was going to start early, and it did. You saw Mike Baumann as the first guy out of the bullpen with a 1-2-3 inning and a strikeout. Now, he faced the Red Sox starters in that game, and it still wasn't like their A squad they had out there. Nick Vespi threw a 1-2-3 innings as well, although he pitched, it was either the 7th or the 8th, and that was mostly the reserves, the young guys out there. And then we also saw Jonathan Heasley earlier in the game. He could be starting depth, but has a chance to make the team as a bullpen arm. Not as good there. 3 hits, 2 runs, a homer, 2/3 of an inning for Heasley. Stuff just didn't look super sharp out there for the right-hander who the Orioles acquired from the Royals earlier this offseason. And it's the little things that can separate these guys, and they will all have plenty more chances out there in spring training games, but you want to make a good first impression, and I would think Baumann definitely did the best job of doing that. And then the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-3 spring training opening win over the Red Sox on Saturday is that Colton Cowser was the hero in this one. A 2-run walk-off homer in the bottom of the 9th with the Orioles trailing 3-2 after Errol Robinson got on base to start the inning. Cowser was certainly aided by the wind down there in Sarasota, Ed Smith Stadium. That ball out to left center field just kept carrying and carrying. Looked like a long fly out off the bat, and then all of a sudden that thing just dropped over the wall for a 2-run walk-off homer. It's always funny to see walk-offs in spring training, even walk-off homers. Like, you get the little celebration at home plate, but half the veterans are already gone out of the dugout, out of the clubhouse. So you got a lot of the young guys who were like in the game at that point in the 9th inning of a spring training game, a couple of guys who had stuck around, a much smaller group meeting Cowser at home plate because of that, and because also it's a spring training game. But listen, Colton Cowser is going to be in a dogfight to try and get on the Orioles opening day roster. There is certainly a spot for him to win. At the very least, there will be at least one spot that he can slide into. But with the struggles he had at the big leagues last year, he's a little behind the 8 ball to get an opening day spot. The Orioles, I think, would be fine, giving him, a solid amount more AAA at-bats. But it was a great start to spring for him. He hits the homer. He comes out and starts Sunday's game, which we'll get to, draws a couple of walks, has a nice hard hit fly ball as well. This is a big spring for Colton Cowser. He played center field, and I thought he looked solid defensively in center field on Sunday. I still don't believe he can be a full-time center fielder, but maybe he can convince me that he's good enough to be a fill-in center fielder on your roster, which would allow me to lean more towards maybe Cowser can make the opening day roster. He made the plays he needed to make. I worry about him on the tough plays. It hasn't looked good over the past couple of years when I've seen him out there, but a good start to the spring and a big spring for Colton Cowser. But as you do in baseball, the Orioles, after the win, turned right around and played again on Sunday. And Sunday, while Masson wasn't broadcasting, we did have the Pirates broadcast TV feed, and We got the StatCast numbers from Sunday. We got the TrackMan in the Pirates ballpark, and we got a little further look. And some guys were lighting up the radar gun, but specifically one Orioles pitcher who you don't really think about as a flamethrower threw the hardest pitch of his career. So what does that mean for Cole Irvin? We'll talk about that coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 just if your bet wins. And you can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot at FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So we're recapping the Orioles' first 2 spring training games of 2024, a 4-3 win Saturday on a Colton Cowser walk-off 2-run homer, and then they followed it up with a 2-0 victory over the Pirates on Sunday. This one was on the road in Bradenton, the home of the Pirates spring training facility. And there was not a MASN broadcast, but if you do have MLB TV or access to other options, the Pirates broadcast almost all of their spring training games, and they broadcasted that one on Sunday as well. And the even better thing for analyzing what goes on in spring training is that the Pirates at their spring training ballpark, they have a TrackMan with public data. Now, every ballpark has TrackMan, maybe doesn't make it public. They make it public. The Orioles at Ed Smith Stadium do not. So if you go on Baseball Savant, you don't get the exit velocities and the pitch velocities and the spin rates and all that good stuff. You get it when you play in Bradenton. And that is what we got, a TV broadcast and the StatCast. And that really allows you to break down a spring training game. So let me get you the 5 things you need Orioles spring training win on Sunday. And the first thing you need to know is Cole Irvin threw a pitch harder than he ever has in his career. And this is something that I like to talk about, how I like to look at both pitch velocities and exit velocities. If you can do it once, you can do it again. You'll hear me sometimes cite max exit velocity on this show. It's because, yes, that might be the hardest hit ball of a player's season or a player's career, but if they've done it once, they can do it again. And it's the same with a pitch velocity. Cole Irvin threw a fastball at 95.9 miles per hour, so basically at 96 on Sunday. That is the hardest pitch per StatCast of his career. He had never thrown above 95 in his career. If he can do it once, he can do it again. And Irvin, throughout this offseason, especially since pitchers and catchers had reported, had been kind of hinting at, some changes in his game, in his repertoire, in his arsenal. The fastball velo spike looked like the big thing, but it wasn't just the fastball velo spike. Irvin saw velocity go up on all of his pitches. He averaged 94 with the four-seamer in this game. Last year, he averaged 92.2 on that four-seam fastball. And here's the other thing for Irvin and, spiking the velocity now. There are a lot of guys who their velocity continues to go up throughout spring training. Their first spring training outing generally is not as hard as they're going to throw in the season. And some guys can just get to their velocity faster than others. But if you think about that, we're still a month away from opening day. And Irvin, in his first spring training game outing, is throwing the hardest pitch of his career. And he even said, with the upped adrenaline at Camden Yards and the regular season, like we could see 97 or more from Cole Irvin in the regular season if he's on this track. That makes things very intriguing for Irvin. I mean, his cutter velocity, the cutter was really good, got a couple of whiffs. That was up to averaging 88. That pitch averaged 85 last season. Sinker velo was up, curveball velo was up, changeup. Every pitch was up more than 1 mile per hour, higher than when he threw it in 2023. And Irvin, we know, had a tough start to the season last year, 3 horrendous starts, and then was sent to AAA. But when he came back in the second half of the season, whether he was starting or pitching in relief, he pitched to like a 3 ERA in the second half of the year last year. And now we know with the Bradish and Mean setbacks, like Irvin right now has a spot of the 5 in the Orioles starting rotation to begin the season. But the question will be, okay, once John Means returns, whether it takes him, let's say it takes him a month, May 1st, John Means is ready to go. Does Irvin still have a spot? Does Means take Irvin's spot, or can Irvin hold on to it? Means replaces Kramer or Tyler Wells in the rotation. And Irvin looked really good. I mean, it wasn't just about the velocities. It's not like he was just throwing hard and getting hit around. And again, that's more important than the outcome. But the outcome was 6 up, 6 down with 3 strikeouts on 28 pitches with just 1 hard hit ball against the veteran lefty. Like, that's good too. And again, in spring training, that's not as important as how the data looks, how the pitch shapes are looking. But he's getting swings and misses, 6 whiffs on 15 swings, the cutter, the sinker, the fastball, the curveball, looking good against righties and lefties. I really liked what I saw, and I'm not going to take too much out of 2 innings in his first spring training outing, but I mean, this could be a big, hopefully, bounce back season for Cole Irvin when the O's do need him. And that's kind of one of the hot takes I'm going to jump on for this year, that Cole Irvin remains in this rotation all year, and we're not mad about it. That's an Orioles take I've got here in February. Second thing you need to know from Sunday's game is that, well, that bullpen competition that I talked about Saturday certainly continued. And 2 of the guys who are right on the roster bubble, I mean, right square on the roster bubble for the bullpen, kind of got hit pretty hard on Sunday. The first was Brian Baker, who did throw a scoreless inning, but it wasn't super pretty. He gave up 2 hard hit balls that were recorded as hard hit balls in play. He also threw a slider down the middle to O'Neal Cruz, who demolished it down the right field line. Had it been 15, 20 feet to the left, it would have been a long home run. Instead, it was a foul ball for strike 2. And then after that foul ball, Cruz took too long in the box and was hit with a pitch clock violation, which awarded Brian Baker a strikeout to start that 4th inning on Sunday. So even though when you look at the box score, Brian Baker had a 1-2-3 inning with a strikeout on 8 pitches, you'll dig a little deeper, and it wasn't great. He did throw 2 changeups. That's my big thing on Brian Baker. Can he command the changeup? He threw 2 of them. Neither of them were very good. The search continues for the good Brian Baker changeup. And then there was Keegan Aiken, who again threw a 1-2-3 inning on 4 pitches when he came in the 3rd in relief. And yet it seemed like all those balls were hard hit fly balls. Now, only one of them was over 95 miles per hour, but one of them went all the way to the warning track. There was another Brian Baker ball that Heston Kjerstad made a nice play on the warning track. Yeah, I don't know about their first outings, but again, you let them ease into spring, and then you really start to make a decision. But on the flip side, relievers that looked much better, Wanderson Charles, I think, impressed me in this one. Now, he was facing some of the Pirates' backups already because he pitched in the 7th inning, but he walked a batter, he allowed a hit, he got a strikeout, he put up a 0 with 16 pitches and 2 hard hit balls. But I liked that it's kind of a hard slider categorized as a cutter for Wanderson Charles, but it's a really, really good looking pitch. I mean, he throws it 88, 89, up to 90, 3 whiffs on 4 swings. And there's the fastball he always throws hard. It was 98 to 99 on Sunday in his 1 inning outing. Now, Charles is not on the 40-man roster, but he is in big league camp as a non-roster invitee. Orioles brought him back this year on a minor league deal, and he's got the stuff. It's just been the command issues. Maybe that stuff is there for him to maybe, just maybe, find his way into the Orioles bullpen at some point this year. 4th thing you need to know from Sunday's game, I mentioned it already, but Heston Kjerstad, I thought, looked pretty good out in left field. Now, he certainly didn't play the whole game out there, but he got the start, and we didn't see a whole lot with the bat from Heston Kjerstad in this one. Did ground a single through the right side in a 1-for-3 day, but made a nice running catch up against the wall in left field. Like, he made the plays he was supposed to, and that was a pretty tough play, that ball off the bat that Brian Baker served out. Looked like it was destined for an extra base hit, and Kjerstad didn't crash into the wall, but he certainly ran into it and made a nice catch. He's never going to be a center fielder. The O's are never going to try that. But if he has the ability to play a solid left and right field for the Orioles, that changes the complexion and gives him an even better chance of being on the opening day roster and sticking with this team. So we shall see, but definitely good signs for Heston Kjerstad. And then the 5th and final thing you need to know from Sunday's game is that Enrique Bradfield is just so fast. I mean, we saw Bradfield come into this game, had an infield hit. His speed on that infield hit caused a throwing error, which allowed the Orioles to score their first run of the game to go up 1-0 in the 7th. Ended up going 1 for 2, made a couple of nice catches in the outfield as well, did Bradfield. But the speed is ridiculous. I mean, it's a little cue shot that would just kind of hopped over the pitcher's mound towards the second baseman. And by the time the second baseman picked it up, Bradfield's basically already at first. Now, for some reason, he tried to throw to first. The throw was wide. Kobe Mayo came around and scored from second base. But that speed's going to change the game. And the Orioles are going to continue to work on the bat. And he's probably going to begin the year at Aberdeen and get to Bowie at some point this year. And he is certainly not a piece for the Orioles at any point in 2024. But we know the speed and the defense are going to be there for Bradfield, the Orioles' first-round pick last year. And it's just, can they get the bat to come around a little bit? Because he puts pressure on everyone just when he is on the field with the bat in his hands or on the base paths. And it's kind of like Jorge Mateo, but just with a way, 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 way higher ceiling. The speed kills. It truly does. And it's fun to watch when Bradfield does it. And also, not my 5 things, but shout out to Ryan Long, pitching prospect, pitched in the WBC last year, struck out Mike Trout. 2 solid scoreless innings at the end of this game as well. Fastball up to 97. You like to see that from Ryan Long. But those are the 2 spring training games. Orioles 2-0 this spring. World Series, here they come. But there were some other news and notes from Orioles camp from the past few days that we want to get to as well to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, but it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors, well, they have got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So to finish things up on a Monday episode here, got a few Orioles news and notes to get to from the past few days in camp. We'll start with Kyle Bradish. That is the number one thing I think on every Orioles fan's mind in camp right now, coming in with that UCL sprain. Remember, a sprain is a tear. It's a small tear, but a tear of the UCL. We don't know exactly what the injury is, how bad it is, but we do know that Bradish got a PRP injection. He started throwing again. He's trying to avoid surgery as best he can, and we did get an update from Bradish and from Mike Elias over the weekend that Bradish threw from 90 feet. That is the furthest distance he had thrown from so far, and Elias said he felt good. He said he's getting positive results from that injection so far. So it's, at this point, we're in a holding pattern, but so far, so good. And he is taking baby steps in this progress. He's not going to be back like April 15th. We already know he's starting the year on the injured list, but it's not going to be quick. It's going to take a couple of months, even if it all goes well. But these are good first steps for Kyle Bradish. Another pitcher on this list is Craig Kimbrell, who was throwing a bullpen session on either Saturday or Sunday this weekend. But apparently he said to the media he cut it short by about 5 pitches. He felt some lower body tightness. Now, Kimbrell told the Orioles media that it's nothing he's really worried about. It's something he's felt before. He only stopped his bullpen session out of an abundance of caution. The training staff worked on it. He's not worried at all, and he is still scheduled to throw today here on Monday, another bullpen session. This is just a case of a veteran knowing his body really, really well into his late 30s and just letting you know, hey, this is why I stopped throwing, but I should be good. And again, when you have a veteran pitcher like that, he knows where the aches and pains are going to be. He's been through many spring trainings. He knows how to get his body ready for opening day. I'm not worried at that point about Craig Kimbrell. But a guy with a little more of an injury right now is Connor Norby, who we learned had some side tightness early last week on his left side. He apparently did not want to be shut down, but the Orioles did shut him down from baseball activities. On Sunday, he started swinging again and took his first hacks back in the cage since that injury early last week. So obviously the O's will continue to monitor Norby. The way he talked about it made it seem like, yeah, you know, it hurts a little bit, but I'm going to be fine. The Orioles are, of course, going to be taking every precaution they can for one of their top 10 prospects. Now, this is tough timing for Norby because he already has an uphill battle to try and not only get on the opening day roster, but get on the Orioles roster at any point in 2024 as he continues to hit in AAA, and losing time in spring training, especially as spring training games got started this weekend, is not good for Norby. And I think he knows that as well. And that's probably what's frustrating him a little bit more, but he needs to be healthy more than anything. And so we'll see if at some point this week he does get into games. There was a good story from Andy Koska in the Baltimore Banner this week. Andy, who was a guest on the podcast on Thursday to talk about Kyle Bradish and Corbin Burnes and Grayson Rodriguez. Make sure to go back out and check out that episode. But he had an article about Caleb Ort, who is the right-handed reliever the Orioles claimed off waivers from the Phillies last week. Ort, who has pitched most of the last 2 seasons in the Red Sox bullpen and not had a whole lot of success. I talked about how when they got Ort, I wasn't super excited about the move. I thought, okay, he's got somewhat major league stuff, fastball 95, 96, a couple of interesting off-speed pitches, but I was just like, none of the stuff jumps out to me. None of the numbers jump out to me. I don't know why they did this move. And I was also a little irked because to make room on the 40-man, they DFA'd center fielder Peyton Burdick, who has his issues as well, but has these crazy exit velocity numbers and could be a good player if he figures it out. Burdick is actually gone from the Orioles now. The White Sox claimed off waivers from the O's, so he is no longer an option for the Orioles in camp. But Andy Koska writing a good story saying the Orioles are looking at potentially improving Ort's cutter. It is a pitch that I didn't really talk about because he threw I think less than 20 of them total in the big leagues with the Red Sox last year. But the thing was, it was a very new pitch to Caleb Ort in 2023. He added it late in the year, and despite only throwing about 20 of them, he got good results on that pitch. And it seems like the O's see that cutter as a weapon and are going to have him throwing that more and more and more. Ort talked to Andy in his story about how, he was just throwing way too many fastballs. And although he thinks his fastball is good, and it is pretty good, if you're throwing 80% of them, it's hard to get big league hitters out. So really interesting to see if he can do something with the cutter. And here's where it's interesting. Remember Ryan Brazier, who I talked about a lot this offseason, thought the O's should have signed, ended up re-signing with the Dodgers on a 2-year deal? Well, Brazier was terrible early last year with the Red Sox. They DFA'd him. Dodgers pick him up in June, and he had a 0.7 ERA in 40 appearances down the stretch with the Dodgers because they taught him this new cutter, and it was basically unhittable down the stretch. Well, this is a failed Red Sox reliever who goes elsewhere, learns a cutter. Not going to say he's going to be as good as Ryan Brazier, but now it makes more sense why the Orioles made that waiver claim. So hopefully Ort can find that cutter and be a bullpen piece for the O's. It's going to be tough to crack into that bullpen, but there are open spots. And if Ort's got a new pitch, he could certainly do it. And then the last thing is Rockabacco of Masson reporting and others reporting it as well, that Ronald Guzman is finally in camp with the Orioles. He was having some visa issues trying to get to the U.S. for when pitchers and catchers reported 2 weeks ago, but he finally got here over the weekend. Guzman, who was a first baseman in the big leagues with the Rangers and the Yankees from 2018 to 2022, fully converted to pitching last year. And he was in the minors with the Giants. Orioles signed him to a minor league deal this offseason with an invite to big league camp. Lefty with a mid-90s fastball, some solid breaking stuff. And they're intrigued by him to see if he can make that full transition to a left-handed reliever. And so hopefully we'll get to see him pitch at some point soon in some big league spring training games, because I am interested to see what the newly converted pitcher Ronald Guzman looks like on the mound. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to the pod, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be. And also make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles podcast on YouTube. Are very, very close to 6,000 YouTube subscribers. When we get there, we're going to do a fun giveaway here on the pod. All you have to do to enter is be subscribed to the pod on YouTube. So make sure to do that as soon as you can. Orioles do have a split squad, 2 spring training games today. Half the squad will play the Rays. The other half will play the Braves. Doesn't look like either is going to be streamed, so not much to talk about. But we'll talk about them a little bit on tomorrow's episode, plus much more from Orioles spring training when we return tomorrow. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.